we have been extremely consistent in our messages. We have been talking about a call to action until now. It wasn't as organized as planned, but it's been fantastic to see. But what we've been saying right now is this is a great industry. We have a great future in front of us if we want, if we act on it, because there are clouds out there that might change significantly what we have in. I hope we're still fine there. I heard lots of it. But it's time for me to twist it around a bit. Not that we want to be some doom and gloom. I mean, let's see if there is something we can do now that can change things. And we got not one, but 4 incredible speakers, I believe, out there. Let me call them in all one by one. In case, in order, I think of alphabetical, Katalin Badea, the Senior Director of Product Management at NetNumber. Yeah. John Bruner, which is talking over there, not listening to me, but he's the CEO of Aegis Mobile. It's your turn. And I should say, Stefan Heller, which some of you might know, it seems to be the VP. I think he must have paid some of you there. And then we don't have Chris Wright, but we have his double. Craig Smith, can you see a difference? I don't know. But please, let's sit down and have a chat. By the way, guys, what I would suggest to any of you, if you're ever interested in doing moderation and you want to have it and feel good about yourself, don't have them in your panel. We had a call trying to organize the questions, etc. They didn't let me speak. They would just know each other. They know, I mean, everything just flew. So I will be here and just listening again. But seriously, this is our chance to turn around A2P today from fighting fraud to actually building the trust. So guys, easy. How much time we got? 30 minutes. Tell us all, what are we going to do to make it all happening now? We heard how important it is to give it a change, to turn things around. How do we do that? And then I would like to, well, first questions, maybe I'll start with Craig over there. Craig, and this is A2P, P2P, are it two together? Do we need to make distinguished elements? Because you're Cineverse, obviously. You got feet in both sides. Where are we in getting that done better on both?
Well, I mean, the approach, I'm filling in for Chris Wright, so this is all Chris Wright's idea if you don't like it. But it's really, the concept we're looking at is more categorization. So, you get the message in, and I think Steph will talk about it a little bit too, is when you're talking A2P, you've basically told the operators or carriers, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to send. And then you're trusted to do that, right? No one's ever policing or checking that back. So you look at spam, everybody looks at spam, right? And you can figure out what's spam. You can figure out, unwanted categories like, recreational pharmaceuticals, things like that. But the other thing is who's looking, underneath the content and doing any kind of analysis is, are you really sending what you said you were going to send, right? That's the first step to tell it's obviously not a P2P message when you see certain content categorizations. You can tell right away this is an A2P. So now what do you do with it? So you can take a look at it, and like we did a sampling of data. It was real data. It wasn't real time. It was just done after the fact to just kind of say what's being sent out there. And I can't remember the exact looking at the spreadsheet, right, because it's an eye chart. But I counted probably somewhere upwards of 40 to 50 individual 10DLC phone numbers that fell into greater than 10 content categories. Right? That's probably a problem, right? Most people, most companies get approved for one. So there's your first indicator. So I think we're trying to go down the path of looking at the content, what's in it. First off, P2P, A2P, you can make that determination pretty quick. Then secondary to that is, how far off did you drift from what you told everyone you were going to send? Then the follow-up to that is, how much do you, the carrier, care? What is the level that they've drifted? Maybe it's certain situations acceptable, probably not in a lot. And then, there was I think 5 numbers at the top, but we kind of laughed because we have 29 content categories. There was 5 numbers that had 29 content categories they were sending under. So that's kind of the approach we're looking at is, look at what's being sent, make some determinations off of that, all up to what the operator wants to happen to it. Not really our decision. We're just going to say, here it is. What would you like us to do? And then what do you want to take on from there?
Thanks. So to build trust, you open in the box, look it inside, and check on the category, and then do a bit of a double check.
What I asked for Christmas, did you give it to me?
Oh, okay. Well, but talking about probably, if not the Santa, but the wish list for Santa, then Stefan, you also look at the intent in the campaign registry and the declared intent, right? You know, people publishing that information with you. How is that going?
Right, so with the campaign registry, we are a registry. It's kind of in the name of the company.
It does what it says on it.
Yeah, really. So we're not a compliance house. We're not saying you should be following, well, we're not checking the compliance because there are a totally separate set of guidelines, CTIA published them, that people should be following. And we point those to people and we tell people about them. But we validate the data that they're putting into the registry. So we have validation checks in various fields to make sure they're putting that information in. And one of the fields, for example, the ubiquitous sample message. And I know for all of my aggregator chums out there, the sample message is often, it could be fictional. It might be accurate. The reality is that now when, as a registry, we're capturing this information, the key message to all of the brands out there is that the sample message should really reflect what you are planning to do, not just some arbitrary thing that you think you may do in a year's time. Because at the end of the day, when we're actually capturing this data, and it's a capture of what people intend to do, which includes brand validation and the brand check. This is the brand that's going to be sending the information. And then the campaign type that they're going to be putting around that and what that campaign consists of. And then tying, with net number, the numbers associated with that campaign within net numbers systems. And then with John here, being able to do the validation of those brands and the verification of those brands so that we have, it's not just a bunch of people at the registry doing one thing and going, yep, we think we got it right. We work with experts in each of the independent areas to make sure that all of the pieces are tied together. And when those pieces are tied together, to Craig's point here, that then we share that data with people in the ecosystem that are responsible for ensuring that that right kind of information is then passed throughout the chain. So the people that are running the spam filters on behalf of the carriers, or even on behalf of the aggregators out there, they are able to look at the data we have and check and go, this is what somebody said they were going to be sending. And whether it was a 2FA message or whether it was a marketing message, account notification, this is what we're going to be sending. And here's a sample message of what it would look like. And I know that, and I'm sure that the people here from Proofpoint and NIA will be much better than me explaining the various fuzzy logic that can be used with that kind of fields of data. But then when you're looking at what is actually happening in market is where the key thing is. Because at the end of the day, and most people, if not everybody in this room, has had that situation where someone says they're going to do X, and then a month later, an hour later, a week later, a year later, they're doing something totally different. And it could be they're doing something totally different that is valid. They just haven't updated what they've said they're going to be doing. They might have forgotten to do that. And really the reality now is that you need to ensure if you are changing your message to something else, you let people know. If you are going to be doing 2FA and you have no plans to change that, then don't let somebody in the organization suddenly use it to blast out a whole bunch of other kind of messaging, because systems are there that are going to flag it now and are going to say, wait, what are you doing? Because you said you were meant to do this. So as a registry, we are capturing that point in time and space, which is, you've said you will do this.
So for what I hear, you were saying you're just a registry, but you're more than a registry. There are some friends out there, which are like you work your audience here, that you're saying you're working together. There are some natural checks on what happens. But more importantly, it's a call to action to everybody here and say, don't just look at compliance. It's a small tick that you have to go through. that would be your greatest friend to get quality out there, is to also pay attention to what you put in the registry.
And compliance isn't there just to make our lives difficult. It is there because it's there to protect consumers.
Yeah.
And that should be the key thing that everybody in the whole ecosystem should be concerned about, because at the end of the day, the consumers need to trust the messages they're getting. They need to trust what they're actually reading and know that it's coming from the source that says it's coming from. So.
Love your registry, okay, and take part in it. And but now moving on to something, as you mentioned, let's talk about. We looked at the inside of the envelope. We looked at the registry of intent, what you're doing. But what about the senders? What about the companies out there? So, John, what would you suggest we do?
Thank you. You want to do it together? Yeah, so Aegis is really, in this instance, focused on identity and vetting verification services. But our main push is really to create as frictionless a process as possible, as efficient a process as possible, while keeping the cost as low as we can for the brands that are entering these markets. And so to do that at excessive volumes is really our goal, to make this a highly efficient market. Now, the complexity of businesses of all types obviously creates a lot of challenges if you want to be turning around identities in 3 seconds and you want to be turning around background checks in 15 seconds. But this is what we're striving to do, and we've done so successfully with about 1 million transactions to date for 10DLC. And like I said, we're also trying to integrate as much as possible with the rest of the life cycle, because the reality is what we've been able to demonstrate to some of our carrier customers is that when we identify a bad actor, which is oftentimes a very, very small fraction of a percentage in a market, but they can take the whole market down. But the idea is once we identify a bad actor, we have hundreds of data fields on that company. And we know all the related companies, and we know all the key employees, and we know all of their digital presence. And so the ability to take all that data, we can provide it to the filter companies to do a better filtering so that when they start rotating URLs, you already know what's coming. We can also prevent them from coming back as new entities because they're going to have to change everything about themselves to be able to come back and re-register. So, doing this with high volume, high efficiency, low cost is really the idea to make this market strong from our perspective at Aegis.
And so I understand that what is important there is the overall richness of the profiles you build, not just of us, but it builds over time. It's a repetition analysis, right? So whatever you do now will have an impact for the future as well.
Yeah, and one key important point is that we always talk about the bad actors, and they are a very small percentage of the market, if you will, right? But they have devastating impacts. But part of the idea as well for getting feedback is to identify the good actors. Put a carrot in front of the good actors that are playing well. We have companies that are very unknown. They've been around for 6 months. There's very little history other than that they exist and they don't match any bad guy databases. But it's still a risk to open them up to massive volumes, right? So how do you create a process that you can get feedback from their traffic, about their traffic, that it's strong traffic, and over time you can learn to trust them. And in essence, we're putting scores on companies for their traffic volumes. Those scores were defined by the carriers, but how do you create a dynamic score for these brands? And that score, most often will probably go up because most players are good, but those that are bad, obviously, we can track them. So kind of need to look at both sides of the fence here to really make this industry go. We need to reward the good players and give them, greater access as they prove that they're going to do it well.
Great. And to continue our look at all the potential views to build trust and so on, actually, I'm going to pass it over here because I'm going to ask Kathleen questions on numbers. You have, I didn't sign.
Yeah.
You came prepared, you see?
Yeah.
He came early, he did the stuff, speakers, take notes. So, Kathleen, let's look at the numbers itself.
Yeah.
Numbers.
Yeah.
How can we build trust using the number itself?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I start by saying, I think we're in a unique and privileged position in the United States with having the 10DLC mechanism in place. It's an industry effort, and it's something that in other countries it doesn't exist. We have here, like my colleagues explained here, we know the entity sending a message, we know the intent of the message, the use case. So this is a lot of data that in other countries simply doesn't exist. You can send a message with any sender ID in other countries, so it's much easier to use the messaging channel for some of the fraudulent activities. In terms of using the phone number data for better security, so there are a couple of things that are pretty easy to do, but they go a long way. For a specific text message, is the sender ID, is it a valid, is it an invalid number? The receiving number for a one-time password, has it maybe recently ported, or was the SIM card, maybe swapped? And by correlating some of the metadata that is collected already as part of the process, some of the other data sets that exist in the industry in other shapes and form, putting all this together, it essentially enables the whole process to be better secured.
So we got another important view looking at how can we make sure that some of the transport mechanisms are really helping us to figure it out. Okay, 4 different solutions out there. There are probably more that we can do, but we looked at the important NDLC, we got a registry. We can look at the actual traffic flow themselves. We look at the historical information of who's the sender and the numbers themselves. Now, when we had a call, you made question to yourself. So I'm now going to ask you to do the job of a moderator. So from 10DLC, Stefan, what would you ask to your lovely panelists here? What is your ask to them to build trust?
I know who should pick on first. Craig.
Validate we used to work together.
Yeah, we did used to work together. Yeah, that's true. So from Syniverse's perspective, obviously, campaign registry is not in the messaging path. But Syniverse obviously is. So when you're looking at the data, what are the key things, what are the key fields that you would say are critical to have to really have the information to really be able to get the analysis you need to show there's a difference, number one, but also then what are your actions when you find that difference?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, right, if the message was, or the sender was tagged and said, this is what this message should be, it's not there today, right? That's an element that would help, right? And that would kind of cut to the chase on a lot of things. The other thing is when you get under it and you start looking at the content, the way we're doing it, it uses machine learning. So it starts to figure out what the content is and where does it fall. So that's really the biggest step you can take. And like I said earlier, right, the fastest one, is it P2P or is it A2P? Pretty simple, and then just go from there. Then secondary, and I mean, I'm not speaking for Chris, but even my own opinion from being where we were on the enterprise side at one time and now back on the carrier side, is the next one is the obvious hitters, right? Spam is spam, right? And some of those, 4 or 5 categories are just simple.
Yep.
There they are, so check, you're done. The next one gets more complicated is, to your point, is it 2FA? Is it, marketing? That's the next one, and that takes a little bit more of a look. So we're looking at all of that, and really you're trying to park it into a category, right? And that's just what our machine is saying has happened here. And then you do fallout from it is probably the best way to describe it. You just issue out a report hourly, monthly, hourly, daily, weekly, whatever, and you kind of look at what's in here. There's always going to have to be a human aspect because you say now from your data, what did they say they were going to send? I think that's the most important part is, and we talked in the prep call, you need to focus hard on that because now somebody's going to check on you. You said you were going to do it, now we're going to make sure you do it. So then someone has to look at that and say, okay, it's really a little bit skewed. It's not invalid. Let it go. And to your point, maybe some of it's okay and let it rip. The next one is what did you do? Like the example I gave with all the ones that are doing 20 plus categories. Somebody needs to figure out what am I going to do with this, right? That could be the carrier. That could be us on the carrier's behalf. Whatever that arrangement is, and operate on those rules. Do you just blatantly just shut it off? Probably depends upon how egregious that is. Or do you just contact the sender and say, you've been bad, you're going to be shut off? Or I'm going to charge you more. Or I think we've seen it before, right? There's a carrot involved in this. We always talk about the bad and we're going to whack you with a stick. Well, the other one is maybe you're good and we're going to feed you better, and who knows what it is. So there's a myriad of things, but really more importantly is what is in that message, what kind of a category do you put it in, then treat it from there, and who treats it. But at the end of the day, the people with the skin in the game are the carriers, right? They're the ones, like nobody is going to call the sender and say, you just sent me stuff I didn't want. They're all going to call the carrier. So you really want to say at the end of the day, no matter where they fall, what does the carrier want done with it, and then act on it.
So in essence, what I'm taking away from that, Craig, is that your data and what you do would be better with my data. I think that's what you said. I appreciate that.
It's a love relationship starting here.
I'll move on.
Yeah, you do that. It's starting to sound like a dating game.
John.
I'm a little jealous.
So John, may I ask you as well, what would you ask of your panelists, of the people out there, that you would like to do to improve?
I've got a question for John.
Oh, you go ahead. Oh my God. I told you I don't have a chance moderating these guys. Impossible. You go, Stephen.
No, I'm good. John, obviously you've done, as we know, a lot of different kinds of validation and verification, not just for 10DLC, but obviously Aegis does a whole different range of different kinds of products that you have for the ecosystem. But have you found that something like 10DLC has been the most challenging, or would you say there's something else that has been even more challenging?
Well, thank you for that. Actually, so 10DLC is really where we brought automation into vetting and verification and identity verification. And so in itself, hooking up 60, 80 data sources that are called automatically in seconds is a massive challenge. And the reality is that when you're trying to match two authoritative sources to verify a company legally exists in the country it's from, there's a lot of information that's being put in by the brands that doesn't necessarily align. And so creating the artificial intelligence and the machine learning, and then going across multiple sources to make sure that you're getting a valid return of information that corroborates that this is 99.99% likely the right information for the right company, is a lot more challenging than our historical deep dives where analysts are going in and looking at companies anywhere in the world, but they can spend days putting together a 50-page report on that company. So, and then the second is managing cost, right? So the restrictions with all the data suppliers on what you can and can't do with their data to keep the cost down, because if you're going to use it in certain ways, they're going to charge you an arm and a leg. So the challenges are definitely there. But as I said, it's been a great opportunity. And, yes, to answer your question, it's been more challenging.
Pass the microphone to moderator, yes?
So what I took away from that, John, was essentially that we've helped you grow into a business.
You've helped me grow.
Catalan. So we work very closely with NetNumber, as does a lot of people in this room, obviously. But we love working with NetNumber. We love the systems that you have and the how you manage the numbers and the routing on the numbers. But obviously, from a 10DLC perspective, it's really critical when the numbers are associated with a campaign, and this happens within your services, your systems. When you find that there are, say, Craig finds, or John finds, or a carrier finds, DCA finds that the campaign has gone bad, and so those numbers associated with it, we shut down the campaign, but the numbers associated with it also then get dissipated. They get shut down. Does that mean that the numbers then come back into circulation within hours, within weeks, within months? What happens to those numbers? How easy is it for somebody just to say, oh, I know I might have lost that number association, but I can quickly get some more and just put it in there. I mean, from NetNumber's perspective, do you see that as a problem, or have you sort of started to look at safeguards around it?
Yeah, no, good question. I think, well, from this perspective, what is important is when bad traffic is detected, how can we stop it immediately? And what you mentioned, there is a strong association between, the phone numbers associated with the campaign and then the campaign itself. And then there are different possibilities, can the entire campaign. So oftentimes, a filtering, a spam filter will find, this particular message has been sent out and it contains, dubious content. So it's important then to identify really quickly what are all the phone numbers associated with that campaign, not just this one. And this is what, with our data that we distribute to the ecosystem can be determined right away. And then expand that from this one number to the entire set of numbers, close all the numbers, close the campaign, and then, essentially keep the channel safe.
And do the actual numbers then, do they always go back in the pool straight away? Or is that dependent on the number owners?
Yeah. I don't have the data to respond to this top of my head. I wouldn't know, yeah.
Well, I'm glad that we can help NetNumber with the association of numbers and the use of more numbers within the registration process. Yep. I think the campaign ID that we put into NetNumber is used by a lot of people to look at exactly what numbers are there, and also the history of that number, which is a very critical part of information that's available from NetNumber, because showing the history can sometimes show that there's some odd practices happening. So I think that's really a critical thing that you have in your systems, which is going to be incredibly useful, and I thank you for that. That's awesome.
Now,
Dario, I've got a question for you. No, I don't actually. Sorry. Over to you, Dario.
My ego is crushed. Help me. Please, tough questions now. Really tough questions for these three lovely gentlemen. Anybody?
Don't take steps. Don't take steps.
Mark Smith of Cisco.
Say it again.
Okay, it's Mark Smith of Cisco. Kind of to pile on Stefan's challenge here, one of the things we've seen in the early days of 10DLC is confusion, right? So there are challenges around. On one carrier, you can send so many messages a day, and another carrier, you can send so many messages a second based on your classification. There's been blocking of messages when a customer's moved from a P2P channel to an A2P channel that maybe they weren't blocked for various reasons. And then what we're seeing in many cases is because of that confusion, that company is just moving back to the peer-to-peer classification. So they're saying, A2P didn't work out for me, move me back to my peer-to-peer provider, and all of a sudden my messages are going through. So to that point, I think there should be some tracking of a number that's been classified as an A2P that suddenly is moved back to a peer-to-peer and an ID, because it's definitely something we've seen at Cisco as companies, CSPs are migrating a lot of their traffic over to the proper A2P channel. They're running into problems for various reasons. It's not always a bad actor. It may be just an actor that's getting caught up in some of the challenges we have in the industry. They're just giving up and moving back to their previous peer-to-peer and an ID with whoever had that traffic before. So just a little bit of feedback. We've seen a lot of that.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. It has been one of the challenges out there, and with the number history information that we're now going to be getting from NetNumber, it's going to be super helpful to everybody in the chain to be able to really identify and really see in real time what's happening with numbers. So I think hopefully there's a change coming, and it will mean that well-informed or more informed is going to be better for everybody.
We have another question here.
Hello. Gentlemen, Eric Perlstein from NetNumber. I love my wife, but I have no idea what her phone number is. It took me a few years to remember her birthday, and I'm okay with that now. If she were to call me and her face and name didn't pop up, I probably wouldn't answer the phone. Is there a way of empowering the end users? Because there's a lot of conversation around the players in the space about protecting the environment. But empowering the end users could go a long way in simplifying the lives of the carriers and of other people in the industry and the industry as a whole by allowing them to simply check what this number is, that it's been approved. What is the message supposed to be? They can, if given the opportunity, check for themselves, then add that number to their contact list by name and have it pop up on a regular basis. Right now, there's really no way for them to do that. Is there a way of moving forward and simplifying a lot of people's jobs and adding trust to the ecosystem?
Your own wide list. Anybody?
Yeah, there's really not a way that somebody can go look a number up, right? I mean, I think a lot of us have tried it, and you get a bunch of junk, to be frank. You know, probably the quicker and easiest way to the end is, and I know some of our product people, and again, I'm not in product, you can see it says sales here. So if anything, I'm going to overcommit. But probably one of the more logical steps out there is to basically verify the sender. You know, that's the easiest thing right now, but now you have to get people on board. But I do think, you know, when you look at the legitimacy that someone wants around their messaging, you know, me as an individual, yeah, I would do whatever it took to verify my number so that people, you know, would know it's me and know it's valid. And I think a lot of enterprises would do the same thing, right? Especially, I mean, it's no secret that this is happening. Enterprises realize it. You know, I was on the enterprise side. I was a seller. I spent probably 20% of my time I spent unselling customers when I found out their only intent was to come on and spam. So I think, to your point, it's hard for somebody to go look, but it's probably not insurmountable to ask people to verify themselves and then get into some type of a token or whatever that hits in the message stream. So when it arrives at your handset, you know, who knows, a crystal ball, a star, you know, Stefan's shirt, you know, shows up on the screen, valid number, it's good to go. You know I was going to go there. You took enough shots at me. So, I mean, that's probably the most likely thing to happen first. And then a lookup, I guess I would go for, I do know my wife's phone number, I don't know that I want someone looking up my mobile number. I get enough calls I don't want now. So I would go with the token aspect.
Hi, I'm Brad Herman with Text Them All. And we recognize that, you know, Cineverse, you're talking about looking at messages by the point that they get to you. And then we have John looking at the brands. What opportunity do we have to hold, because in my mind, I'm the initial gateway in, we're the CSP. And what opportunities do we have to score and hold the CSP accountable? Not going, you know, Craig, you talked about it's the phone number was the problem. Or John's talking about it was the brand, but, you know, to what extent, and maybe put a carrot there for CSPs that are bringing good actors in, and then a stick to knock CSPs that are allowing entry to these bad brands. I mean, if a CSP submits 20 bad ones to John, that's the problem, is the CSP who's courting those crummy brands. So how can we incorporate some CSP accountability or carrots, if you will, into this process?
Yeah, I'll take a shot at it, right? Because I'm what they call a retread at Cineverse. This is like my third tour of duty there. But I did spend some time out selling in the enterprise space, and the company I went to work for was Open Market, right? We did not leave somebody on there very long. We would actually take them off the network, right? I don't know that's true everywhere, right? Because it's a dollars game, right? You get paid to send junk traffic across the line. You know, but there's nothing, what I'm describing, that we would do on a carrier's behalf. We could also do it on yours, right? Like, I think what you're suggesting is before it leaves your network, which I mean, I can guarantee you that every carrier in a room would love it if it didn't even leave your network, right? Then it's not a problem on theirs. The same thing can happen on your network. You get it from whoever's behind you. It comes in, it gets categorized, it gets looked at, and it gets stopped, blocked, throttled, whatever the case may be.
Well, I think we probably need to stop for questions. There might be more. And I just need to say that there is a future for things that we can do together in the industry. There is no future for me as a moderator. Stefan is taken. It's gone. But it was nice and brief until I was here. But now, a big thank you to the four of you. Thanks again.